Hello and welcome. I am your host, Sherry Andrea. Thank you to everyone for listening, and I appreciate you greatly. I appreciate all my listeners, and if this is your first time joining me, thank you so much for listening. And if you have listened before, I really appreciate you listening again. If you ever want to get in contact with me after the show, or you ever have a question about something I've spoken about, always feel free to email me at Sherry, Sherry, at sherryandrea.com, and that's SherryAndrea.com. As I said, I'm Sherry Andrea, and tonight's topic is the I Am Presence, Higher Christ Self, Angels and Guides. Actually, I had a tough time figuring out what to do for today's topic. I mean, there is so much that I could discuss. And some of the shows that I've already done, an hour usually isn't long enough to delve into them 100%. But I don't want to be boring or repetitive, so I try not to do shows about the same thing back to back just to be able to keep it interesting for you. So, for example, Tuesday's show was about the truth about relationships. It was a really good show, and I really enjoyed it. And I knew that 60 minutes wouldn't be long enough to really discuss everything about relationships, but we did get to at least start the topic, start the conversation, take a couple of callers, which gave you a really good example of what I was talking about. And I had already, decided even before the show ended that we would probably have to do at least 2 or 3 more shows on relationships. And if you really like them or you just like the way they're going, I mean, I don't mind designating a specific day every week if you would like to. I mean, you can contact me always and tell me suggestions that you would like to see. I don't have, problem adding another show. Like if you want to designate a certain day to always do shows about relationships where we talk about the truth about relationships. I take callers and give the mini readings plus a little bit of coaching like I did with Tuesday's show. So I would be really interested to hear back from you to see what you think and to see, what your feedback is as far as adding another show, if you want it or not. I mean, I really don't know unless you actually leave a comment and tell me what you think. So leave a comment and at least let me know what your feeling is, and then that gives me a better idea of how to plan for upcoming shows, because as you can see, this is only the 4th or 5th show, and as you can see, I haven't really thought ahead and planned ahead as far as show topics. I guess I just don't work that way, or I guess maybe other people are good with picking a topic, weeks in advance, and still by the time it gets there, being really interested in speaking on that topic. I can only speak for myself, but I find that I first of all, it has to be coming through from my higher self. If it's only coming through from me, yes, I will be passing on knowledge that I have, but where the knowledge is really helpful to people is when it's really coming through almost 100% my higher self. You might be able to tell from the previous shows that when I'm speaking as just me, Sherry, there is a difference between speaking as me and speaking as me merged with my higher self. And that is what's going on, in case you wonder what I'm talking about. There's a merging going on. Now, some people refer to it as channeling, but more and more people are beginning to not refer to it that way. And the reason why is because it gives the indication that what we're talking about fits the standard of the classic definition of channeling, which gives you the impression that you are allowing a being or an entity to enter your body and speak through you. And emerging is not exactly, it does not exactly work in that way. Most often, a person who channels because they are merged with another, I'll call it energetic source. Most often that energetic source is their own higher self. And the how good the channelings are, how good that information is, how good that knowledge is, that would be based on the clearness of the channel. So how clear I am, how much spiritual work I've done, how much work on the self that I've done, how much of my ego I have in control. All of those things play a factor in what comes through me and out of my mouth, what I'm able to communicate to you and on what level I'm able to communicate it to you. So, for example, back when I hadn't done that much spiritual work yet, well, actually before I even started, when I would communicate with people or try to give people, pass on knowledge and information, it didn't come out like it does now. It was very rough. It was often, I was communicating things that maybe I misunderstood, and then I slowly was taught by my higher self and ascended masters that what I needed more than anything was to achieve a higher spiritual level so that I could achieve a lot more expanded awareness. And so that's why, even though it kind of maybe seems to some people like the cart went before the horse, because I awoke into abilities first, started like most jumping in and looking for information on that, and it was all about the abilities at that time, and there was I had no idea that I would end up on a spiritual path at that time. So yes, that's where it began for me, and that's where it begins for many people, because that is the thing that kind of awakens you and starts you to questioning. Because when you awaken to an ability, even if it's subtle, or whether it's manifesting in a huge way, well, of course, that's going to have you wondering what's going on. And it's going to start bringing up questions. And you will start questioning everything from God to Christ to angels, and answers that you end up finding to the questions that you have just lead to more questions, until before you know it, you're no longer on that path you thought you were on, and you're on a completely different path that you weren't even expecting to be on. I didn't know I would be on a spiritual path, and many people don't. 10 years ago, if you told me this is where I would be, I would have probably laughed at you. You know, but that's just, that is how it is. But anyway, that's why many people are referring to it as emerging instead of channeling, because we're not really talking about allowing just any old entity to speak through us. And it's not speaking through us as though someone's entering our body. That isn't the way it works. Literally, it is when you're talking about merging with your higher self, it is literally a merging that the ability to merge comes out of the spiritual work that you do. Without doing the spiritual work that I've done, I wouldn't be able to have this merging with my higher self, which is who I refer to as my beloved Christ self. If you recall, and kind of we naturally just jumped into the topic, I guess. As you recall, in the Bible, before Jesus was crucified, the many meetings that he had, the many talks he had with his disciples and apostles, during a couple of them, they were still they weren't sure, some of them, what they felt about what he was saying about leaving them. They didn't want him to leave, of course. I mean, that was someone that they greatly loved, greatly respected. In their minds, they were thinking, what are we going to do without him? You know, who's going to lead us? That's often what happens to people. when a person who has been their all and who has guided them and never let them down, never steered them wrong, is going to leave, you do have a tendency to think, oh my goodness, what am I going to do without you? Well, they felt the same way. But he tried to explain that here, incarnate in the body, he could only be at one place at one time. He could only be teaching at one place at one time. He could only be with one of them at one time, or in a group of them all at one time. However, if he left and came back, the question he posed to them was, wouldn't it be better if I leave and I come back and I can be with everyone all the time at any time? Now, of course, if your master that you love so much and that had taught you so much and that you credit with getting you to where you were, that was your everything, and that you really felt like you relied on to the point where you almost felt like you couldn't live without him. How would you be able to survive? How would your teaching continue without him being there? Of course, how would you answer that question if it was posed to you? Well, of course, you would say, well, of course, that would be much better if you could be everywhere at all times. If you could be teaching me, and teaching him at the same time. So they didn't really understand the question he posed to them, but that was only because, and it's the same right now, many people still don't understand it. But they didn't really understand what he was telling them was going to happen. Back then, they spoke in metaphors. They spoke in parables. Things weren't as it is today. Today, everything is pretty much explained out in detail. We're so used to that. Everybody explains it. Even now, when I'm coaching and teaching someone, if I say something to them, often, what will they say? They will say, well, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Well, can you explain it because I don't understand it? Now, back then, what was common was that the way Jesus would explain things is he would tell them a story or a parable to use as an example. And then, of course, he himself was like a living example. Oftentimes, the things he would go through, he would use those as teaching examples. Even his own crucifixion was a teaching example. The Last Supper, when he washed, their feet, that was a teaching example of the master not being greater than the student and the student not being greater than the master. So what he was trying to explain to him, and this leads us into explaining the higher self, because I was talking about the merging with the higher self, but you really, you can't sufficiently merge with the higher self unless you understand who the higher self is. And many people don't. They think they do, but many people don't realize who that higher self is. That higher self is actually what happened after Jesus was crucified and he came back. Okay, a lot of people will ask me, well, what do you think about the second coming? Well, what do I think? Even though the majority of people on earth don't realize it, it's already happened. What do you mean, what do I think? It's something that's already happened. It's something that's happened to you and you don't even realize it. It's something that happened almost right after he left. And all this time, think about how much time has passed. All this time has passed, and we still don't realize that the second coming has already happened. The second coming is him coming back, individualized within each one of us, as our very own beloved Holy Christ self. Now, if you go to summitlighthouse.org, and that's spelled, I have to write it to spell it right to make sure I'm giving you the right address. Summitlighthouse.org is spelled SUMMITLIGHTHOUSE.org. If you go to summitlighthouse.org or just Google summitlighthouse.org and Chart of the Divine Self, it would be good if at this point you put this on pause and go and do that Google search and pull up the Chart of the Divine Self. if you pull up the chart of the divine self, as I'm explaining this to you, excuse me, you will understand more of what I'm actually talking about, because the chart of the divine self actually, shows you in visual form exactly what I'm speaking about. Now, if you look at the chart of the divine self, you'll notice that there are 3 individuals in this chart. You see the lower individual, which is considered the lesser self. Some people don't call it the lesser self. I've been scolded by people for calling it the lesser self, but I don't mean that in a negative way. By calling it that's just something that it was called when it was taught to me by the Ascended Masters. That's how they referred to it. But some people refer to it differently. They might call it the ego self. I've heard some people refer to it as the little self. Well, if you don't like the lesser self, you're probably not going to like the little self. But it's a label. Labels don't matter. That is your self that is incarnate in a physical body, is represented by the figure that's at the bottom of the chart. Then above that, and you can look at the chart and you can see the connection that the 3 have from one to the next is from a crystal cord that leads from the heart of the lesser self all the way up and out the crown and into the heart of the beloved Christ self, up and out the crown, and then into the heart of the top figure, which is the I Am Presence, your own God self individualized. I'm not going to get into I Am Presence, God, well, where is God really? Is God outside of myself? Is God really that upper figure? I'm not going to get into that right now, because that's a really complicated discussion. Not only that, but understand the higher self first, and then expand yourself at a later time to understand the I Am Presence. Just know that it is there, and that think of it as your own God self. So, like I said, there is the lesser self, that is the bottom figure, and then above you, directly above you, is your higher Christ self. That is Christ come back as your Christ self. That is your own connection to Christ. But notice I haven't used the name Jesus. I didn't say Jesus. To explain this, and you may not understand it, and if you don't, that's okay. If you meditate on it, raise your vibrations a little and expand your awareness, you may more clearly understand what I'm saying. Okay, so I did not say Jesus. I said your beloved Christ self. Okay, in Jesus, the individual who lived, who was Jesus the Christ. Okay, he was born Jesus. After he achieved enlightenment, after working on mastery, he achieved enlightenment. After he achieved enlightenment, he was then baptized. Now, you probably all remember that. Okay, once he achieved enlightenment, that is when he became Jesus the Christ. Okay, that may not have made any sense, and I understand, but you see that what I'm trying to point out to you is the difference. He was Jesus the person. He achieved enlightenment. Or you could say he achieved spiritual and God mastery in a way where he 100% had God in him. At the time he achieved enlightenment, light-in-ment. It's like another way of saying light in you. So once he achieved enlightenment, that is when he became his Christ self, his beloved Christ self. Okay, so what that means really is a complete 100% merging of the lesser self with the beloved Christ self, to the point where you then at that point begin living 100% as your Christ self, individualized in you. So you understand, or you should understand, that is what we are all trying to achieve. That's, whether you realize it or not, whether you're conscious of it or not, lifetime after lifetime that we live, that is our goal. Our goal is to finally achieve that highest state of spiritual advancement in a lifetime. It's not the highest level of spiritual advancement, but it is the highest level of spiritual advancement while incarnate. So that is our goal, always, lifetime after lifetime, is to achieve that. Because what is our goal? Simple. If you've read the Bible even a little bit, you know that your goal is to transcend what they call transcend death, meaning you no longer suffer the human experience of having to live and die and live and die and live and die. You then become eternal, and then you never die again. I'm not going to get into that either right now, because then that's also very complex. But I just want to explain to you who your higher Christ self is. So, because without understanding, how do you achieve the very thing that if you don't understand it? So that is your goal. One of your goals when you first hear higher Christ self or higher self is to begin the process of establishing a relationship with your higher self. Begin communicating with your higher self. Begin relying on your higher self. Begin asking your higher self for questions. When you're trying to make a hard decision, instead of picking up the phone and calling your friend, begin asking your higher self for guidance and waiting for that guidance to come and trusting that it will. Excuse me. But at least begin to try the process of getting to know your higher self, because if you don't make the attempt to actually try, it's not going to happen on its own. I've heard many people say to me, when they see how complicated, it can be and how hard it can be on the spiritual path, and how much you have to do, how much reading and meditation and this and that. Some people, they've told me, they're like, oh, that's okay. You know what? I'm just going to stick to doing a little praying, a little meditating, and if God wants me to be that, He'll make me that. Okay. I'm sorry. That won't get you anywhere. So if you're one of the people who believe that, stop believing that, because that will only lead you to coming back lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. You will not transcend death. You will not receive eternal life as long as you do not drop old, incorrect belief systems and pick up the new belief systems. And that is what most often holds us back, is our own belief systems. And that's a part of one of the very first things that you start working on when you start on a spiritual path. Not only just working on the self and working on issues of the negative ego, working on your, anxiety, the negative emotions like anger, frustrations. Not only do you start working on those and, unresolved issues from the past, but you also begin working on your belief systems, one at a time, basically. When something comes up to you that goes against an existing belief system, that is your clue. That is like God saying to you, okay, now you've got a difference. You believe this, somebody just told you that. That is your clue. That's like, ding, ding, ding. Okay, take a look at it. Take a closer look. And take your time. Take your time. And once you take your time, maybe do a little research, talk to people about it, talk to your higher self about it, have some time to think, what do you really think about it? What do you really believe? Then you may get to come to the conclusion that you do want to drop your old belief and pick up the new one. And this is a step-by-step process that happens over an expanded period of time. Some people, all of this happens faster than others, but that's only because they're working at their spiritual advancement on a very conscious level. This is something they consciously work on. They're not just waiting for something to come up. They're actually, they're moving things along themselves. So I explained a little bit about what the higher Christ self is. And I'll leave the explanation there for now. You can find out more in detail about the Higher Christ Self on the summitlighthouse.org website. The reason why I'm recommending that website, and you may think it's strange, like, why didn't she recommend her own? It's because I do have a tendency, places, people that I've studied from, you could say. Because, see, summitlighthouse.org is actually sponsored by Jesus and Saint Germain, the Ascended Master Jesus and the Ascended Master Saint Germain. And it's actually sponsored by them. And this site contains all teachings for disciples, chelas, from the Ascended Masters. So you could say that this site contains all channeled information. But not just any channeled information. I'm not just talking about, someone with no spiritual advancement channeling. I'm talking channeled by people who have attained a high level of spiritual advancement and expanded awareness, channeling information from the Ascended Masters and information that you can trust because of how clear they are, because of their spiritual work that they've done on themselves. So that's the reason why. Some people have the motive of success in what they do. Some people think of something hampering them from making money, from selling a book. That is not me. That is not me at all. I don't think about competition, so recommending you to another website, I kind of feel like I am doing what I'm supposed to do. And ethically, in a spiritual ethics sort of way, I'm also doing what I'm supposed to be doing, because my whole purpose in life is to not only do the same thing the very thing that we all are responsible for doing, which is to pass on the knowledge, or rather what they call the leaves of the tree of life given to you each day. Not only do we all have that responsibility, but also it is also my purpose in this lifetime that I help others along their path. So I wouldn't be doing you justice if I didn't also, the site and the people who greatly helped me, if I didn't also say, hey, look, go here, great information, you can trust it, it's from a highly advanced spiritual, person who has channeled it, so that is the reason why I do it. So in case you're wondering, I am not motivated by trying to outdo the next person. I'm not motivated by trying to get somebody to my website as opposed to someone else's. I'm not motivated to getting someone to my seminars, getting someone to my workshop. I'm not motivated by that. I only have one motivation, and that has to do with my job and my purpose in this lifetime. So the next thing I want to discuss is, after that, is angels. Okay, when I first started out, this is even before I started down a spiritual path, I heard a lot of other people talking about angels and guides, and I really didn't have any knowledge about angels. At that time, I didn't even know if I believed whether angels existed or not. And so I actually had to go and do a little research, and I started actually reading about Archangel Michael, Archangel Raphael. I started also reading about other archangels such as Archangel Metatron, and I found it very interesting. I mean, I still didn't know a lot, but I began at that time calling on them for help and assistance. And from the very, very beginning, I was just amazed at the impact it had on my life. Not just on my spiritual journey, not just on my spiritual work, but on my life in general. I was able to greatly rely on the Ascended Masters for protection, for knowledge, to help me in the process of raising my vibrations. A little bit of everything. I mean, this is going to sound funny, but even Archangel Raphael used to help me a great deal, because on the weekends when there's a outdoor mall near me that is very popular, but on the weekends, oh my goodness, parking, it's almost impossible. And usually I would want to take my son to I think it's a Barnes and Nobles there. And so the hardest thing was trying to find a parking space anywhere near the bookstore. And so what I got into the habit of doing is I got into the habit of asking Archangel Michael when we were almost there to help me find a parking spot. Well, the first time, I thought maybe it may have been coincidence that we found a parking space directly in front of the door. But then the next time and the time after, it happened again. I asked him for help finding a parking space, and lo and behold, there's one right by the door. More and more things like that happen. Asking, for them to watch over me while I'm driving, and then getting a little nudge when to slow down and realizing there's a police up ahead. Yes, that was my intuition. However, my intuition wouldn't have kicked in if I hadn't have asked them for that help. Where would it have come from then? You know what I mean? I didn't have that. My intuition wasn't developed at that time. So it's really great to read about and start the process of calling on the archangels. Now, there are a lot of angels. I've only discussed archangels. There's archangels and then there's angels, and as far as angels are concerned, there are a lot of angels. And when I say a lot, I'm talking like, if I remember correctly, when I first did research on angels, I think there was like 300 and something angels, because there's different types of angels. There's archangels. There's what's called sentinel angels, which main job is basically, they're almost like, their main job is protection, to protect you, and that is the only job that they do and that they take very seriously. And so they don't generally communicate with you. They're not the type of angels that are going to be, you're going to call on to communicate with you, that are going to help you, that are going to teach you. No, they have a main job, which is very important, which is protection. And so they cannot be distracted from that. But like I said, there are different types of angels, and if you just using Google, you'll find a wealth of information on angels and archangels and different, just Google types of angels, and you will be amazed. And start calling on them. I mean, many people say that they want to change their lives. They want to live a life that's better, or they want to live a joyful life. They want to live a life full of miracles. Well, literally, it's kind of right at your fingertips. It's not very difficult to achieve that. And I'm living proof of that. I mean, it got to a certain point where I felt like I was living a life where miracles had become so commonplace because they were happening every day, 2 and 3 times a day. And some of the most amazing things were happening. But anybody can live a life like that. But you have to understand that you have to be fully involved in it. You have to be participating in achieving that type of life. It doesn't just come because you sit back and you say, oh, well, if God wants me to have that type of life, He'll give it to me. That's not the way it works. I think there's a saying that basically, in effect, basically says that like the person who works for it, like, is the person who is going to achieve it. Well, saying that, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, Sherry, duh. Well, then most people don't take their spirituality the same way. For some reason, most people take spirituality in a different way. They always want to give it to God, which is with certain things you do. There are certain things, like, for example, if you're trying to let go of something from the past, it's not unusual to bring it back up, look at it from all sides, see the reality of it, and then once you have and you've learned from it and you're ready to let go, to literally release it and let it go. Release it, meaning give it to God. And from that point forward, it's gone. You've given it to Him. There's that. But then there is what I consider, and sorry, I'm just going to say it, being lazy. If you are not taking full participation in where you're going and in your advancement, then how do you expect to get anywhere? I mean, one, God never said it would be easy, and He never said He would do it for you. And I'm sure you would agree with me with that. You would agree with me. So why are so many people so quick to say, well, you know what, I'm not sure what to believe, so I'm not going to think about it anymore because this is too difficult of a thought, so I'm just going to leave it up to God. If God wants me to have it, He'll give it to me. We've got too many people right now thinking that way and playing a very passive role in their own spiritual advancement when they could get so much further ahead just by making an effort and trying. Just simply trying. Now, the last that I'm going to talk about, and as you notice, I haven't delved too deeply into angels, and I'm not going to delve too deeply into spirit guides either. I am going to say this, is that for those of you who, there are some people that only call on Jesus. There are some people who only call on God. And, various religions have their belief on who you're supposed to call on. I can only tell you the truth, but I can't. It's not my job to make you believe it. I just put it out there, and then you meditate on it, and you decide what you believe is true. God has helpers. And if you believe in oneness, then you couldn't possibly believe that the only one you should be communicating with is God or Jesus, because that would actually be a contradiction to the concept of oneness. Oneness is that, for example, if you pray and call to God for help, and I ring your doorbell tomorrow, well, I may be that helper that God is sending. Why? Because we're all one. We are all that little piece of God individualized. He has put a part of Himself in all of us. It's like you could think of it this way. Genetically, who are you really? I mean, you genetically think that you're the child of your mother and father, and that's true. But genetically, really who you are the child of is God. Genetically, you are. Now, that part of your DNA can't be seen under a microscope. That part of your DNA does exist. Spirituality very much is within the DNA. Your DNA is genetically encoded with who you are, and that you're a child of God, and that you are a part of God, and that you were made in His image. And you have to understand the symbology of that. Made in His image means like Him, meaning you are the same, just a piece of. So you have to understand that means that we are all that. So if you pray to God for help, and I just happen to come over your house tomorrow, well, I may have been the one sent, and I may not even realize it. I mean, I show up in people's lives when they least expected, when I least expected, and that is, in fact, how it works. So when you ask for help, you never know how it's coming. And so that's how I wanted to start it off, the conversation of guides, because there are many people who, when it comes to the angels and the guides, you kind of lose them there. That's kind of where they want to stop talking about it, about guidance, because they have beliefs that they've been given growing up from their parents, from their church, and these beliefs, they're very strong, belief systems, because some of them, we've had them all our lives. So they're very strong, they're very ingrained in us, and we're living our lives based on them, whether they're right or wrong. And so that's why I had to say that before I go into the conversation about guides, because there will be many of you that will have a hard time with that and won't want to go there. But it's okay. Meditate on it. See what comes to you. Anyway, there are different types of guides or helpers. There are guides that are assigned to you, that are assigned to be with you your whole life. Then there are guides that are only with you during certain times of your life. There are guides that are specifically assigned for a reason. Maybe you're an artistic person and you're a painter, and that's what you do for a profession. Well, maybe one of your guides that is assigned to you in their previous life that they lived incarnate, maybe they were an artist. So wouldn't it make sense to you to be for one of your guides that is guiding you, if you're an artist, for that guide to be an artist? You know, and that is how it works. I mean, if you're a medical professional, say you're a doctor, most likely one of your guides in at least one of the lives that they lived has been a doctor, medicine man, some healing profession. Now, let's say you're just starting out or you're getting ready to change professions. Maybe there's something you've always wanted to do, but you've never done it, and now you've decided, second chance at life, and I'm going to be this now. And maybe you were all your life so far a nurse, but maybe you decide that you want to instead be a painter now. Well, you may be thinking, okay, well, I probably have a guide. One of my guides is somebody who has healing experience in one of their lifetimes. Well, you can actually request to have a specific type of guide. So you can actually request that. You can actually, it's not unusual. I've done it myself. While working on clairaudience, I requested that one of the guides that I be assigned to be Archangel Michael. And the reason why, and it helps to have a reason for it. The reason why is because Archangel Michael is one of the archangels that, I want to say it the right way, is easiest to hear or comes through with the best clarity. Actually, to be honest, I do not know why. I'm guessing it has something to do with either the vibrations or the ability he has in raising a person's vibrations that he's working with. But it's not unusual to want to request a specific guide or to work with a specific Ascended Master for that matter. I mean, for example, the Ascended Master Hilarion, who was the Apostle Paul. Well, in his last lifetime as Hilarion, he was Hilarion the healer. He did all his life, did healings just like Jesus did. And the reason for that lifetime, just to explain, was because once he got to the end of his life as Paul, he still had a lot of karma he had to work off because, remember, he was the biggest opponent to Jesus and his disciples and apostles. So he had done a lot of things against them, and he had built up a lot of karma because of it. So at the end of his lifetime as Paul, he did not ascend. So he is not the Ascended Master Paul. He is actually the Ascended Master Hilarion, because he had to come back for another lifetime for the specific reason of having to work off that karma before he could ascend. Because back during that time, you had to have, I think it was 100% of your karma worked off. It's different now. Now it's only 51% of your karma you have to have worked off. It's a little bit easier, and we have more tools for doing that than we had back then. Now we have the violet flame. The violet flame is what is commonly used to help work off karma, as well as still, spending your life being a nice person, doing good deeds, etc., etc. And so, of course, if you're working as a healer, of course, for every person you help, you're working off karma. And then your goal is to hopefully you're working off more than you're building up in your lifetime. So it's not unusual for when you're working on spiritual advancement, or even if you're not on a spiritual path yet, and your focus is just developing psychic abilities, there will be many times where you may want to be taught by a certain person or receive guidance from a person, from a certain spirit. Like one of the archangels, and that's why it's a good idea to research them. Look up what their specialty is. What is their specialty? There are archangels and I can't remember off the top of my head. I can't remember I think it's Archangel Metatron, because Archangel Metatron is also responsible for Metatron's cube, which is a geometry thing. We're talking sacred geometry. And so he is the one of the archangels that you would call on for anything related to sacred geometry, heavy-duty mathematics, I think also quantum physics, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not sure. But look it up. I think what you will find is very interesting. But like I said, you have all different types of guides. You also have message guides. If your plan is to develop psychic abilities, because maybe you want to help people, maybe you've realized you have a natural ability to channel medical type information. Maybe you found that you have a knack for, like, when you connect to somebody, you get medical type information about them. What's wrong with them? What organ needs work? What vitamin deficiency do they have? Some people have this through their sense of smell, their clairolfaction too. I've heard and read of many healers that first get into healing, and maybe even during their class, maybe they're taking a Reiki class and it's hands-on, and they notice that they're smelling something when they're working with the person who's acting as the patient. And they start to realize that they're smelling different things that are letting them know what is wrong with the person, even if it says something like having a vitamin deficiency. So if you were going to be working on giving some messages, no matter what type of messages you're conveying to them, you would be working with your message guide. We also have guides that are responsible for our joy. Believe it or not, yes. We have joy guides. We have guides that are responsible for our health and well-being in that way. There are all different types of guides. And I have a book that was really good at explaining it. It's called, if I'm not mistaken, it's either called So You Want to Be a Medium or Do You Want to Be a Medium? On the next show, I will tell you the exact title and author. If you want to know in the meantime, just email me. So I'd like to wrap this up with, you can research guides on your own. You can Google it and find out more information. The last thing I want to talk about and I want to touch on is your loved ones, where they fit into all of this. There are people who believe their loved ones become angels. That is not true. There are only 2 angels who have ever lived a human existence. That is Archangel Metatron, and I can't remember the other. And I always do this, so I apologize. One lived as Enoch and the other one as Elijah, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, those are the only 2 that ever lived a human existence that ever became angels. So people do not die and then become angels. What happens is, like, if you think of it, there's a hierarchy, and you could almost think of it as your next step is ascension to becoming an ascended master. So that is the next, as far as, where you're going next in that hierarchy. That is what we are living lifetime after lifetime to eventually finally achieve, just like many others. Just like Jesus, many of the Buddhas, El Morra, Hilarion, Saint Germain, and the list goes on and on and on. There are a lot of ascended masters, and you could call on ascended masters, like I said, meditate on them. If you think about it, there is an awesome book that actually talks a lot about which ray each of the Ascended Masters are on and which day that's associated with the purpose being that you're going to meditate on that day as though on that day you are meeting with that Ascended Master in meditation. The book is called The Human Aura, and it's by Elizabeth Clare Prophet and Mark Prophet, and that is actually published by Summit Lighthouse. And it's an excellent book, as well as the other one that I would definitely recommend is Alchemy for Self-Transformation. Notice I said self-transformation. I don't want anyone to think that I'm talking alchemy, changing, base metals into golds and precious stones. That's not the type of transformation that alchemy actually refers to. There is only one type of alchemy, and alchemy is about self-transformation. It's about transformation of the person, the individual. Alchemy is actually about improving yourself, transforming yourself. That is what alchemy is all about. Really, really interesting book. It's also published by Summit Lighthouse, and it is that book is by the Ascended Master Saint Germain, which is also responsible for the Violet Flame. Really interesting book. I mean, no matter where you are on your spiritual path, I picked it up pretty much at the beginning, and so as I advanced, I would pick it up again and again and again, so I would read it, put it down for, 6 months, pick it back up, and every time I did, I would, of course, understand at a deeper level each time. So these aren't books that I recommend. These aren't read one-time books. When it comes to spiritual advancement, often the material that you're reading to get knowledge from, at every level you attain, you need to read that book again because you'll have a deeper level of understanding. And it is okay if you're reading something and you don't understand it, because what is happening is you're still impressing the information onto your memory body. And what that means is you can do that, and then you can meditate on it. And then with a higher vibration and expanded awareness, what ends up happening is a greater understanding of that material seems to almost flow down into you. It literally seems to just float down into your head. Now, of course, that takes a little practice and a little tenacity on your part to continue and keep up the practice of meditation and whatever spiritual work you're choosing to do, whether that's prayer, mantras, decrees, however you're working on your spirituality. Whatever you are doing is you just do it with tenacity. You do it every day, and you pick up a momentum on it. It is the momentum itself that you pick up that actually helps to start advancing you and to speed your advancement. So I ended with guides, and the only type of guide I didn't talk about is the animal guide. There is such a thing, and I will let you read about that on your own when you feel you're ready for it, but I usually recommend that you first learn about the typical guides, the guides who have lived a human existence before, that are with you on a day-to-day basis, that are there as your helpers. Read about them, get to know them, get used to the fact that they're there, even though you don't know their name and you can't see them. Talk to them out loud. They are not like incarnate human. They don't have the ego that says, oh, well, if you don't know my name, I can't help you. They're not like us. So do not worry about things like, I don't know my guide's name. You can give them a name. You could say, you know what, I don't know your name. I'm going to call, you could tell your main message guide, this is what I'm going to call you. Just be respectful. But will make it a lot easier for you to communicate with them. Easier for you. It's already easy for them. Easier for you is what I mean. And I'm going to end there. I think I've talked enough. And I hope that you've gotten a lot out of it. If there's anything that you have a specific question on, any experience that you want to communicate with me about, that you want to talk to me about, definitely feel free. If there's something that I haven't hit on that you were hoping to get more information about, or maybe related to specific experiences you're having, feel free to contact me. Feel free to either go to my website, SherryAndrea.com, or to email me at Sherry@SherryAndrea.com, and let me know what you want to talk about, what more information you need. I'd be more than happy to help. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this almost hour-long discussion, and I look forward to talking to you again.